If you're an HR professional who works hard to fill roles within your company, keep employees engaged, and build company culture, welcome to America Back to Work, where dreams only work if we do. We'll share wide-ranging issues surrounding pre-employment background screening, HR topics such as recruiting, hiring, labor trends, and company culture, as well as broader HR-influenced business topics such as customer experience, service level excellence, and protecting what matters through best practices in prevention, protection, and corporate security. America Back to Work is brought to you by S2 Verify. Here's your host, Arnette Heintze.
Welcome to America Back to Work, brought to you by S2 Verify, where our purpose is to help you hire with confidence and manage insider risk. I'm your host, Arnette Heintze. Thank you for joining. Today, our guest is Tanya Jarrett. Tanya is the Chief People Officer of Alida, where she leads the experience management and global talent strategy team. She has more than 2 decades of experience in the high-tech, interactive entertainment and film industry. Tanya, thank you for joining me today. You've had a very interesting career with some high-profile corporate names. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about your rise to the top?
Absolutely. And thanks for having me, Arnette. I'm really, really excited to be here. Let's see. So my introduction to the people, the business of people, was a little bit unconventional, let's say. I didn't know right from the start that this was going to be my career path. But I had a really wonderful opportunity at a game company, Electronic Arts, and that's kind of where I forayed into this role, slow by slow. And it was over, as you said, 2 decades, and gosh, time flies when you're having fun, that I had the experience to work in, film, in various industries and companies, and have learned a tremendous amount from fantastic leaders and great kind of people around me that has gotten me here. So yeah, it's okay to take a path of discovery sometimes and not know right from the start.
Yep, that's fabulous. So, I know over the course of your career, you've seen many changes in the economic landscape that we all have to face from time to time. It goes from, the early 2000s, the Great Recession of 08, 09, and, most recently through the global pandemic. How have you seen these major economic headwinds impact you in the role of being the Chief People Officer?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's interesting when you think back. The pandemic feels like just yesterday, but also feels like quite some time ago. And the amount of change that we've gone through as just humans is mind-blowing. I recall before the pandemic when you think you had to ask for permission to work remotely from home on a specific day, and just think back to how much things have changed since then. I think that through the pandemic, many of us struggled with just emotional wellness, physical wellness, just a ton of different challenges that maybe we hadn't faced before, at least in this way. And so the shift from really holistically caring about and leaning into ensuring that the employee population was just well, that they felt that they had a place where it was safe, where they could ask questions. And, none of us knew what was coming. None of us really knew how to navigate any of this, but just providing a space for a conversation around that and not actually without all the knowledge at hand, right? It was all something that we were kind of navigating together. But yeah, I think that the shift is really towards employee well-being, how to actually be a purpose-driven culture, how to actually drive understanding throughout the organization in terms of the value that the people function can provide both to the business and the organization.
Yeah. You briefly mentioned shifts there, but tell us about, as it relates to the employer's job market or the employee's job market. Who do you see having the advantage as we talk today? Is there any particular advantage to one side or the other right now?
Yeah, I mean, I still think it is and will continue to heavily weigh on the employees side of things. There's a responsibility that we have as organizations to ensure that we're creating, wonderful learning opportunities, creating that purpose-driven culture, making sure that people really understand that they have a spot where they can show up as their true and unique selves. I think that the more that we can attract talent through learning and development opportunities, career mobility, and that holistic approach, I think is going to be really important. And I don't see this shift back towards at least an employer market anytime soon.
Yep. So as we look at your role as the chief people officers, and there's plenty, of colleagues that you have across many industries and have the same responsibility. How have you seen the role change over the last 5 years? I mean, obviously the pandemic has impacted that, but when you look at the last 5 years, what have been the major changes?
I think really being a partner and this partnership that a chief people officer needs, sort of the relationship and partnership they need to build with their CFOs and their CEOs and the rest of the executive suite, and just really understanding how the work that we're doing impacts directly the success of the organization. I think historically it may have been a little bit harder. It's a bit frustrating when people think of the people job as the soft and fuzzy. It's so much more than that and more complex than that. I think to the extent that we can show the ROI and show the value as business drivers by kind of demonstrating the metrics around the work that we do, right? Like if we're doing workforce planning because perhaps there's a shift in strategy or we're opening up at a new geography, there's a lot that goes behind that ties directly to people in the way that we hire, who we're hiring from, how we're upskilling, what type of learning and developing, what type of onboard we're providing. Like it's just, it hits every single mark across the HR value chain. And so I think the shift has really been around, not so much back office, but sort of the typical, what you'd think of as the HR function, and shifting more towards business facing, just like the rest of the executive team, and being that true partner.
Yep. So for any chief people officer that has that responsibility, what are the biggest risks and challenges that they confront in general, do you think? And anything that keeps, someone that has this role up late at night worrying about things, anything that jumps to your mind?
Just we're all under, tighter budgets right now. So it's really around how to gain efficiencies, how to look at automation where it makes sense. And there's this, I would say that generally when you're in the business of people, you typically deeply care. And I think sometimes it's hard to actually separate and take home this sense of, oh gosh, am I doing everything I can? It can be a very emotional role, right? And I think that the part that keeps you up at night is just, how do you make this work when we're, so many companies are looking at, staff reductions, budget reductions. How do you set people up for success? How do you upskill folks that even those that may be impacted at some companies, maybe they have the skill set that you were part of helping them build that enables them to land well into their next potential role. There's just so much turmoil right now in the world. The pandemic we got through, but it doesn't mean that the evolution of change or the pace of change has slowed in any way. So I think just agility and resilience and just, keeping up with everything that's going on, but also creating a bit of a safe space to also exhale. Sometimes as people, we're forward facing, we're kind of on all the time, and it's okay to just take a bit of a breath and recognize that you might need a little bit of space too, and that you might need some support, and that's completely fine.
So over the course of your career, I know you've had the opportunity to serve as a mentor, as a coach for many colleagues coming up in this industry. What would you tell a young HR professional that's just entering the job market now and maybe has been in it a few years? What skills and capabilities would you tell them to focus on so that they go from good to great later on in their career?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the one thing I'd say is that it is a tough gig. It's a tough gig because, the thought is if you're doing things well, the function is, you kind of back of mind because typically everything's running well. But I think, with all the things that we spoke about just now, some of the emotional complexities and the way that the world's changing, you have to really want to do this. In terms of skill set, I think when you're passionate about something and you can build, business acumen, financial acumen, these are all things that are mission critical right now. Being able to articulate the value that you bring as an HR practitioner or leader, and translating those into business metrics, I think you have to be able to speak in that language comfortably in order to portray that. And most of all, just believe in yourself. I mean, if we don't believe in the value that we bring, then it becomes very difficult to help others see that. So I would just say those are kind of the main ones. And again, this focus on just agility. You, as a change agent and a cultural champion, you're kind of at the forefront. So you have to give yourself space to find a spot that feels like it aligns with your personal values, that again aligns with your purpose and helps you feel excited to get up every day. When you're in that environment and you've got a great team around you, you're kind of unstoppable. And I think, just the resilience and agility is going to be the big one.
Oh, that's great. That's wonderful insight. So I know you've worked in HR across many different verticals, and giving that experience and serving as a CPO, are there differences in different industries or verticals for the CPO job?
I mean, probably on a nuance level, yes. But at the end of the day, people are people. And, there isn't a separation of the way that a certain person in one industry is going to want or need to be treated or valued than in another. So there might be different skills and whatnot, but at the heart of it, we're all humans. And it's so incredibly important to make sure that we're creating, again, this space of belonging, of inclusion in everything that we do, and really embracing and celebrating the differences, right? We all have differences of experience and background and opinions and all of that. And that kind of whole brain mentality is where the magic happens. So that's kind of where I'm at with that.
Yeah. So share with us a little bit about your expectations for your team when they come up with new ideas, new strategies, new trends, because we all know in the HR field, there's always a new trend arising. What expectations do you set out for your team because at the end of the day, you're going to be the final stop. You're the decision maker on any changes that are going to take place. So how do you set that course for them?
Yeah, I mean, as thought leaders, as you say, keeping on top of trends is part of the mix, right? You have to kind of keep an eye on what's going on in the market. What are some of the things that are working well? Learn from experiments that don't necessarily go well. And that concept of experiments and kind of piloting new ideas, especially when you're innovating, I think is a great way to actually test out some of these theories. I think always striving for a level of excellence, even in the way that we think about things. So if you're bringing forward a decision, think about the ripple effect that the decision might have in every way. That certainly comes with time and experience, because it's not natural to be thinking that way, at least in my mind, right from the get-go. But I think the extent that you can understand how your business makes money, understand how to read and interpret the financials, and again, how to translate the value of the work that you do into business metrics, are all critical.
Yeah. So I'm going to ask you to bring out your crystal ball and help us look forward, maybe the next 5 years. Here we are coming out of the pandemic. We're facing potentially a recession in the next year, as many economic forecasters are suggesting. What do you see potentially on the horizon for changes in HR?
Well, the one that's probably top of mind for many of us is just how to actually leverage artificial intelligence. I mean, there's so many discussion topics about that right now, and discuss and debates around the ethical nature of it. What can we actually use this for? And I think really thinking about it from a way of kind of accelerating some of the automation that we do. So when you think about the mindless tasks, maybe there's something there. I think there's a big chance to actually leverage AI in terms of how we actually recruit for people. And then you got to do the cross-check to make sure that if you're looking at it from let's say that we're trying to reduce bias in our job descriptions, I do think that it still takes a human element to actually review it. That human piece, I believe, is integral to the work that we're doing. So I think that's going to be a big one. And I think, again, just continuing to find creative ways to support wellness, to really make sure that you're taking care of your employees, just celebrating everyone's differences and really bringing that human touch and human element to the role, I think is going to be really, really important going forward. I don't see any of that changing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think we know that AI is going to change our world radically in the next couple of years. But at the end of the day, you've got to keep the people connected to people. And at the end of the day, those decisions, you have to bring that human touch into the equation.
Yeah, absolutely.
As we think about the next couple of years, and there's not a week that's going by here that I don't hear of some major organization conducting layoffs. What recommendations would you provide to HR leaders about the best practices when it comes to maybe announcing some larger layoffs? Any insight you can give us there?
I mean, it's never easy. Even 25 years later, when you're doing it, it never gets easy, and hopefully it never does, because if it does, you probably shouldn't be in the business of people. But to the extent that we can make sure that we're, again, thinking holistically about any changes to the way that we organize the structure of the company, making sure that you have all the right key players supporting the strategy of the business. And for anyone that is impacted, making sure that when you're having those conversations, when you're thinking about how to set them up for success, that you're doing it with the intention of allowing them the opportunity to hopefully land with a bit of breathing space, to give them the support. And this could be something as simple as reaching out to your network and saying, look, unfortunately, we've got some impacted folks. Here's their resumes. They're fantastic people. We wouldn't otherwise have ever thought of parting ways with them. Just trying to leverage your internal network and external network to try and help them out, and ideally have them leave with a sense of grace and dignity. It's never, like I said, it's never an easy conversation to have, but it's something that we're going to have to navigate. So if we can do that in a graceful way, it's kind of the best that we can do, and just be there for them.
Yeah. It's not lost on me that in any large organization, that when it comes to layoff, your HR team is going to be actually included in that mix. And, you're going to have to deliver some tough messaging on that. Have you been confronted with that issue, that challenge much in your career?
No, I mean, there are pockets of times when I reflect back where I've had to, where people on my own team have been impacted. And again, it's really just about, as transparently as possible, articulating the reasons behind the change and helping them to the best of your ability to understand the why. Look, anytime someone's in front of you and you're having that conversation, it's awful. It's a very emotional and shocking, bit of news to hear. And so just being there for the folks that are impacted, and again, helping them sort of say, we're here for you. If there's anything we can do to support, again, just doing it with dignity and grace is really the only thing you can do.
Yeah, that's
unfortunately
some great advice there. So, Tanya, thanks so much for joining me today. Your insights have been really helpful, and I'm confident our audience will gain the same insight that you've provided. So, before we sign off today, I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest, which is, if S2 Verify were to conduct a background check on you, would there be any surprises?
This is where my microphone is going to magically stop working. No, I don't think you'd find anything. Maybe I'm too addicted to dogs. I love dogs. Like, people would probably say you're a bit maniacal, Tanya. But no, aside from that, I'm afraid I don't have anything too terribly interesting to share with you.
All right. Well, thank you. So thank you so much for taking the time to share your expertise with me and our audience, and tell our audience where they can connect with you and kind of keep up with the issues you're identifying in HR.
Absolutely. Definitely on LinkedIn, and certainly through our website, which is Alida, ALIDA.com. You can reach me there as well, but definitely lots of great blogs and postings on LinkedIn as well. So it's probably your best bet.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
And now for a minute with Bill and Jim, my partners at S2 Verify. Let's think about the clients that S2 Verify has. I know, and for our audience, I would say the predominant client point of contact is typically somebody in the human resources department, and typically a leader, a manager in that area. And here we are sitting in, in the beginning of the summer of 2023. What do we think the biggest challenges our HR partners have when it comes to the background screening industry? What are we seeing? What are we helping them with? And Bill, why don't you take us down this path?
Yeah, I think the biggest, obviously for HR people, it's not only on the hiring side, the fact that we've gone on virtual So we're seeing a lot more utilization of our virtual tools, where people can actually do applications or actually do the drug test or the background screen on their iPhone. But I think, one of the biggest challenge for HR people is keeping up with the regulations. And so we continue, Jim and I continue to talk to HR individuals who are asking questions that just don't know, what the EEOC or the FTC or the FCRA, what kind of regulations that they have to adhere to do a background check. And so you've seen a lot of litigation over the last several years because they weren't paying attention to what they were supposed to be doing. In fact, there was one just recently. And so I think that, from that standpoint, they're having to deal with, not only hiring people, but keep up with, all the different regulations and laws and things like that and forms that, they have to do to actually do an accurate background check.
Yep. Jim, any perspective from you on the challenges our partners are confronting today in the HR area?
Yeah, I would just add on to this piece. Arnette, I would add on to this piece of, we've heard a lot of this, as the audience may or might not know. We just acquired a background screening company in New York. And in talking to their clients, there's a real disparity in the definition of accurate and timely. And part of that challenge comes about, the definition of accurate and timely can be set by the client and what their expectations are, or from a competitive perspective, be set by S2 Verify and what you should expect. But I think what's happening is the balance of accurate and timely with, and you mentioned the word, with the compliance-driven aspect now of restrictions by states and courts and what's accessible and what you can't use and what we're not going to disclose. We're going to, for lack of a better term, mask date of birth, and we're going to mask address. You don't know if you've got the right person or not. So that whole issue of accurate, timely becomes a new challenge when you're restricted on access, how you're going to go about getting it in a reasonably quick fashion and making sure it's accurate on that or complete on that person. So that's becoming a big challenge.
For our audience, please tune in next week when we talk with Jessica Gomez. She's a consultant at One Digital about how fractional team members can work for you. We'll see you then, and it goes without saying, let's get America back to work, because dreams only work if we do. Tanya, thanks so much for joining, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for having me, Arnette. Appreciate it.
If you want to stay abreast of HR, recruiting, and hiring trends, tips, and tools, make sure you subscribe to America Back to Work. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating and a review.